We've really wanted to come together today and kind of just really talk about what's happening in Kern County with our testing, what's happening in California with the testing, and kind of an ER physician entrepreneur perspective on what's going on. You're isolating yourself, and we want to talk about if that still makes sense. You know, we both have had extensive classes in microbiology and biochemistry and immunology. We've studied this for each of us 20 years, and we take everything that we're seeing today and we put that against that backdrop and say, does this make sense? Are we following the science? Our volumes have dropped significantly. The hospitals, their ICUs are empty, essentially, and they're shutting down floors, they're furloughing patients, they're furloughing doctors. People with heart disease, people with cancer, hypertension, and various things that are critical are choosing not to come in based on fear. We've seen 1,227 deaths in the state of California. Does that necessitate sheltering in place? Does that necessitate shutting down medical systems? Does that necessitate people being out of work? So I'm not saying who's wrong or right. I'm going through the science and through the numbers. I'm not in an ivory tower. I'm in seeing patients every day, and I'm collecting my own data. I didn't have data 2 months ago. I just shared my data. That's actual, unfiltered, non-political data.
That was a press release that came out by ABC 23. You didn't see his partner, but it was Dr. Daniel Erickson and Dr. Artin Masihi, I think I said that right, that sat down and laid out the data that they were finding in their own clinics, urgent care clinics, speaking in Bakersfield, California. An ABC News, special report with two doctors talking about their data, talking about how they saw the data. Do you want to tell me why this is being censored? Are we not allowed to hear from real doctors giving us real numbers? YouTube issues statement on removal of controversial video interview with Bakersfield doctors. This is 23 ABC received an email from YouTube on April 27th giving the station notification the video had been taken down, setting YouTube's community guidelines. 23 ABC has appealed the ruling through YouTube. We quickly removed flagged content that violate our community guidelines, including content that explicitly disputes the efficacy of local health authority recommended guidance on social distancing that may lead others to act against that guidance, said the statement. These are doctors giving real numbers and facts. They didn't say run out of your house. What they were saying is we would really like to be talking to, Gavin Newsom, or have Gavin Newsom look at the information we are having. This is what news is supposed to do, isn't it? Isn't it supposed to say, you know what, we've got some phone calls coming in, and we're starting to investigate because President Nixon appears that he may have wiretapped, one of his opponents. Oh, well, you know what? The government of the United States doesn't agree with that statement, so YouTube is blocking it. How does news do what it does? How do we investigate if we cannot help, go outward with our investigation? We can't show you what we're investigating. Do you only get the results when it's all over? You know we do this different at the High Wire. You know that's what makes us different than everyone else. We are bringing you the studies as the ink is drying. We're going to do more of that today. I got some really fascinating stuff coming to you. But first, it is my honor to bring on, I think, really a heroic doctor that stepped forward and, like others we've seen during this crisis, say, hold on a second. Maybe we need to take a little bit of a different look at this. I'm joined right now by Dr. Daniel Erickson. Dr. Erickson, thank you for taking the time today. I know you're extremely busy, and I think your phone's probably ringing off the hook right now, is my understanding.
A little bit.
So, first of all, when you sat down to do this press release, did you have a sense, knowing that the state of the country and where things are at, that this might be censored and that there would be a chance that the video would be taken down and no one would get to see this?
Absolutely not. This was supposed to be a little fireside chat with some locals out here in a small Kern community. I basically, reporters had mentioned it'd be nice to see your new data. So I said, okay, here's my positives, here's my negatives. They asked me, what do you think of that? I said, well, out of my data, it's about 6.5% of positives. I said, this is my data and my opinion on a moment in time. This data is not to be extrapolated to the globe. I didn't even know they were going to live feed it to Facebook. I thought this was going to be recorded and we were going to keep it on a local segment. It was going to last for 5 minutes and go away. And then all of a sudden, 10 million views on Facebook, and my world gets turned into this now.
Okay, well, welcome to this crazy world. What is your opinion? I mean, you know, as a doctor, obviously it's happened. And I'm sure you've heard about people feeling like they're censored, and usually it's, you know, some crazy conspiracy theorists. We had to take their video down. They're putting people at risk. I think it's clear you're not a crazy conspiracy theorist. What is your opinion now that you see that censorship is happening like this in America?
Well, I think that YouTube and the WHO need to chat, because if you noticed, Executive Director Mike Ryan, he said,
Yep.
We need to look at the Scandinavian nations. Maybe they're making some sense. We need to look at our ability to self-regulate. This is all coming from Sweden, and that's the people I'm talking to now. You saw this. So the WHO is now saying, let's look at a different approach. The Swedish did not lock down. People are not locked in their homes. Kids under 16 are in school. Businesses are open, and their results are good. And Dr. Anders Tegnell, their chief epidemiologist, when asked, how's your approach working? He said, we're very happy. He said, you guys are the experimental lab rats. You're doing something never done. We're doing a rational, stepwise approach. We're allowing people to make their own decisions and control their own risk. And we trust that the Swedish citizens are smart. And now they're saying, who has the freedom now?
Right. Well, let's take a look at it. I think we do have the clip from the WHO. Let's take a quick look at what you were just talking about, Dr. Eriksson.
My question is on Sweden. It's a country that chosen a different road and strategy, basically no lockdown and an open society through the crisis. Could this mean that the population of Sweden, maybe other countries that have not had strict lockdowns, have a chance to be better protected in case of a second wave, as they have been more exposed and have had a chance to develop a possible herd immunity?
Sweden has put in place a very strong public health policy around physical distancing, around caring and protecting for people in long-term facilities and many other things. What it has done differently is it has very much relied on its relationship with its citizenry and the ability and willingness of citizens to implement physical distancing and to self-regulate, if you want to use that word. And in that sense, they've implemented public policy through that partnership with the population. They've been doing the testing, they've ramped up their capacity to do intensive care quite significantly, and their health system has always remained within its capacity to respond to the number of cases that they've been experiencing. I think in many ways Sweden represents a future model of, if we wish to get back to a society in which we don't have lockdowns, then society may need to adapt for a medium or potentially a longer period of time. I think maybe in Sweden they're looking at how that is done in real time. So I think there may be lessons to be learned from our colleagues in Sweden.
This is actually quite an about-face, and we covered Sweden. We had a report done from Sweden, and you did see people walking around, but they kept their distance, but they were in restaurants, and schools stayed open, and everything seems to be okay. And there's been a real pushback. Trump has said there's going to be a huge death rate. I've been hearing, oh, it's going to be a huge death rate. They're making a mistake. That's not the case. Let's get past Sweden. You know, I know that you don't have all day, and you got a lot to do. So for those people that are not among the 10 million that saw your video, take me through the data that you shared and that you discovered through your work. Now, you have an urgent care facility in Bakersfield, California. Is that correct?
I have 7. I have 7 throughout California, from Fresno down to almost San Diego.
Okay, so because I've heard arguments, it's only Bakersfield. He's using this small little community to extrapolate, but you actually have a fairly wide demographic across Southern California.
Again, my data and my opinions on my data are not the most important. I'll go through it with you if you like, but the most important thing I can share is the opinions of epidemiologists that have been watching this for 30 years. I interviewed Dr. Witkowski, which is a brilliant biostatistician. What does he do for a living? He analyzes studies and data and helps the public understand. So I asked him, what do you think of what's going on? I said, is there science for sheltering in place? is there science for, social distancing? And
Yeah.
he said, absolutely not. And then they interviewed the Swedish epidemiologist, and they said, is there data for locking people in their homes? And they said there really isn't. So this is an experiment we're trying. And my thought is, if you're going to do an experiment, you better have some good scientific data before you lock people in their homes, tell them they can't come out, cause depression, anxiety, alcoholism. This is stuff is coming into my offices. This is not fabricated. This is my opinion on what I'm seeing. And you have to ask yourself the big question.
Let me bear down on that with you, because, what we're hearing is that it's like a war zone. The ERs are like a war zone. The urgent care facilities are barely hanging on. There's no room. We're going to run out of beds. There was going to be a shortage of ventilators. You are on the front line. You actually do this for a living. Describe to me what it has been like to be working in an urgent care facility in California through this. Did it get to the limit? Were you almost about to run out of beds? Was there a real concern for a shortage of ventilators? What did you see on the front line?
No, we're a spread out county. Kern County is one of the biggest counties in California. We're spread out. So I called the CEOs of the local hospitals, and they said our volume is down. They've had to cut hours. They have plenty of surge capacity if we should have another spike. So my volume is down significantly. Everybody has the same story in this area. Nobody's busy. Yesterday I checked, and we had 14 people in the hospitals, according to our local public health, that were in the hospital because of COVID. And we had, I think, 6 or 7 deaths total. Every death, is terrible. We don't want any death, but out of 1 million people, these numbers are fairly low. And so I asked them, we have surge capacity per their phone call I took with them. So if we should open up the schools and take a rational stepwise approach to open up this economy, our hospitals in Kern County are ready. I can't speak for, LA. I can't speak for the entire state, but in Kern County, we are ready.
What you at your urgent care facility, one of the things that really got you into this is you've been doing testing. You've been having people coming in, and you've been running tests. What were your numbers when you looked at those tests?
I got them right here.
Okay.
The numbers I was using was we had a total of 5,213 patients tested. Now, to be clear, those were not randomized. Initially, the CDC had asked us to test people for fever, cough, shortness of breath, which we did. After about 3 weeks of that, we started having employers asking us to test hundreds of people that had no symptoms. Some had exposure, some didn't. If they were in the food industry, and let's say they were in the shipping department, and one guy had a fever, well, they would send over 400 people, whether they were exposed or not. Then we had people coming in that had an elderly grandmother at home or an immune-compromised husband. They had no symptoms but wanted to be tested. So our data started to get more randomized. But at the 5,213 mark, we had 340 positives, which is 6.5%. And I was just sharing this data. This is raw data. This is not biostatistically analyzed by an epidemiologist. This is my opinion of raw data at one moment in time. You do not extrapolate this data to society. So the data I use now is from CDC, from Worldometer, and then I talk to the epidemiologists and the biostatisticians, and I say, what should be our message? Now that we have data, 2 months ago, we had no data. So of course we're gonna take a real cautious approach. That was wise. But now that we've had 2 months of data, should we take a different approach? Should we be more like Sweden? I say yes.
And, and during this press conference, you kept saying, millions of people infected, small death rate. Millions of people infected, small death rate. And you compared this to the flu. Do you still hold on to that comparison? It's one of the things that gets attacked a lot in this conversation. You did cover one of the points. They said that your data was not randomized, and you explained it didn't start out randomized, but got more and more. If an office building says send everybody in, much more randomized. They're different people, different ethnicities, and they certainly aren't coming in because they're having some sort of symptoms. But where do you see this death rate in the data you're looking at? Now, I get it. And we've been sharing, no one in our audience is brand new to this. We've been sharing worldwide data too. But when you look at your data, 6.5%, you extrapolate it out, what is the death rate of COVID-19 compared to the flu in your mind?
Well, let's look at the data once again. The CDC on their website In 2017, 2018, we had about 60,000 deaths from flu. The flu season usually lasts 3 to 4 months. I've been following flu seasons for 15 years. Sometimes it's bad. People are in hospitals. They're intubated. They're dying. Our hospitals are overwhelmed. It's terrible. Sometimes it's mild. This is like a bad flu season per Dr. Gisecki, per Dr. Witowski. These are epidemiologists analyzing flu cycles for 30 years, and they have told me this is like a severe flu. This is their opinion I'm sharing. How many deaths total? 62,299. We have 1 million total cases out of 6.2 million, or about 16.6%, 17% at a moment in time on Worldometer. A moment in time is what we have today.
Right.
But what I'm saying is we need to listen to the people who do this for a living, who have degrees in this, and who are saying this is like a severe flu, and they're recommending a stepwise approach to get the economy back going. And I think that's rational.
Okay, so tell me, both you and your partner, Miseki, is that it? Misiki? Is that Masihi?
Masihi, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You both have done a lot of work in immunology. You've looked at this in virology. We're being told that the smartest way to deal with, this virus, and I'm going to have to assume viruses in the future. I don't know how we don't do this way. We lock down. We sequester ourselves. Are there, on one hand, we know that locking down is going to certainly cause unemployment. It's going to cause all sorts of issues, with other illnesses, right, and poverty and all that. But there's actually a danger to the health of people for locking down, too, isn't there? From a virology position, what is your thought on that? What are the dangers of locking down physically at this time?
Let me talk to you about what I called a doctor out of Wisconsin, Dr. Lang. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that. And I said, what are you seeing? And he said, well, I was in the ER last night, and I had patients that had chest pain a couple of days ago, but didn't come in for fear of COVID. They had different severe things that had gotten worse because they were sitting at home afraid to come in. That's one. Number two, people are calling me asking for anxiety medications that they haven't been using. Alcoholism is going up. People are telling me they're drinking more, and this is all public knowledge.
Right.
So there's multiple things we have to consider. The collateral damage of a total shutdown versus the damage of the virus itself. And to me, the scales are tipping towards the collateral damage is affecting all Americans. The virus, 95% of us get this virus and have a fairly mild go at it. Yes, we have some deaths, and those are terrible. I'm a physician. I don't want anybody to die. Some of these people would have died during flu season. And so what I'm saying is, let's take a rational approach. Let's look at Sweden. I think, like the WHO stated, we've got something to learn from them. I think that their approach is working. If you look at their deaths per million, 225. United States, 175 per million. Italy and Spain in the 400 to 500 range per million. UK, 360 per million. UK is on total lockdown. They have 360 per million. Now, we can't make judgments about this until the complete cycle has gone to say who wins, who chose the best route. But I think you need to choose a route that doesn't destroy your economy while you're dealing with the disease.
Do you think there's going to be a benefit, though? There might be, locking down, there could be a potential side benefit that since we all locked down, we didn't come in contact with viruses and bacteria we would normally come in contact with out in society. So are we going to be healthier because we've sort of wrapped ourselves in bubble wrap and stayed away from each other for this last, 2 months?
Wrapping yourself in bubble wrap is not how you get healthy. You get healthy as you build your immune system. Let's talk about herd immunity. Herd immunity is really a key issue here. We have to get to that 70 to 80% where the virus is in society and it's moving from one person to the other. Pretty soon it runs out of places to go and burns out. That's going to happen whether you lock down or not. That's going to happen in Wuhan, China, South Korea, UK, and the US. The virus will spread whether you lock down or not. People are social. You can't tell them not to intermingle. Their friends come over. They have little parties. They talk to their pastor. They go to their doctor. They go to Costco. So we can go to Costco and Home Depot, and that's okay. But if we go to the beach, we're arrested. And they let criminals out, and they tell us we can't go to the beach or parks and get arrested. You can see this is not rational. Fear has taken over, and people have given up their freedoms for fear, in my opinion.
How does herd immunity work, though, really? From a, I think there's a lack of understanding. This is something that you seem pretty clear on. How does my body react when I come in contact with a virus or a bacteria? Isn't it dangerous for me every time it happens? Or, when you talk about, my immune system being made strong, can you just very clearly, if this is, virology 101 for our audience, how does that work?
When you take in an antigen, a virus, a bacteria, you form an antigen-antibody complex. You form IgG and IgM. These are immunoglobulins, and this is how your body sets up a defense against disease. When we test you, we're typically testing a PCR. We're looking for like pieces of virus. We're not looking for IgG and IgM. The test that just came out, that's called serology, is a blood test. This test for IgG, and the PhD MD virologist that I've been discussing with, who will leave unnamed, has shown me in his graphs that peaks around 7 to 10 days. So post-exposure, we can test you for immunity. And in my opinion, the most important test to run right now is the serology. Why? Because we can see, are we at that magic 70 to 80% mark? As you know, the curve has been flattening. We are no longer on an upward progression. It is flattened. And now, if we could have some wide-based testing, we could decide if we have 70 to 80% herd immunity and put everybody back to work. But the testing is laborious and time-consuming. So I think a stepwise approach to get Americans back to work and giving them some hope that they're not going to be locked in their house for the next 6 months is a critical discussion right now.
Do you think locking down was a mistake?
I think initially we did this because, hey, China had this virus going crazy. You know what? China had an advantage, and I'll tell you what it is. Their disease peaked before they locked down. If you notice, February 4th is when China peaked. I know some people don't trust their data. Look at South Korea as well. They didn't lock down early. They waited until herd immunity happened. Then they locked down on the 21st. So they had the advantage of developing herd immunity after they locked down. That's an advantage.
When I think about my kids, I see a lot of people now, we're all washing our hands, we're washing our kids, we got disinfectants everywhere. I personally don't think that that's going to be the healthiest world for my child to live in, but you're an MD, you've looked at this. Is that how we want to live? Is that the best way to keep our children healthy?
Well, I'll go back to the example of a 4-year-old child, and I'll say, if you were 4 and you were my child, and I put you in a plastic ball like a hamster wheel and never exposed you to the outside world, you would not have a strong immune system. Immune systems are developed by exposure to antigens, viruses, bacteria.
So it's important. It's an important part of life.
It's the way you develop an immune system. No one would say, hey, Dal, we're going to put your kid in a plastic ball for 5 years to protect them. No, they're on the floor. They're grabbing staphylococcal, streptococcal bacteria, all kinds of rhinoviruses. Little kids are sick all the time. Their nose is running. That's how they develop the immune system. If you take that away from them, they are not healthy.
Do you know if you've tested positive for COVID-19?
I have not tested positive. I have tested negative, in fact, through PCR nasopharyngeal swab.
Does that make you happy, or would you prefer to have had it by now?
You know, I may have had it, Del. Most people that have had it have little to no symptoms. They call them, you know what an asymptomatic carrier is? A healthy person.
I think I've heard someone say that before.
They have this magic name. Are you an asymptomatic carrier? That's called a healthy person with no disease, and they developed immunity. They are IgG positive.
So, just to wrap this up, there's a real concern now, I think. We're now hearing that there might be a second wave. There's thoughts that in these states, Texas right now, Georgia, are about to open up. People saying you're going to have disease outbreaks if you open up. Is that accurate? Are we going to see an outbreak when we open up, and are we going to see a second wave in the fall, in your mind?
Do you know why we would have a second wave?
Why?
Because we sheltered in place. You only have, if you don't shelter in place, they talk about flattening the curve. When you flatten the curve, you drag out disease. Then when you open the economy back up, you get a second spike. Is that going to happen? Nobody knows. We've never been in lockdown. The biostatistician, Dr. Vitowski, the great one, this guy is just awesome. I've talked to him for about 3 hours, and he said, we might get a spike. We might not. We'll see, is the answer. So
right.
We don't know at this point. Our hospitals are prepared. I've asked our CEO have surge capacity. Yes, we do. In Kern County, we're ready. Let's get the economy open in a stepwise fashion. Let's think about the average American out there who is struggling, who is angry, whose business. I talked to a coffee shop the other day. She's losing both of her businesses. This is a real problem. It is crushing many Americans, and it is stomping on our freedoms. And I think it's time to make some different decisions.
You know, you're living in a state that's probably doing, you know, really more seriously locked down, I would guess, than almost anywhere else in the country. Gavin Newsom announcing after a bunch of people went to the beach just the other day, I'm shutting down all the beaches, all the parks. Even after we've heard that being out in the sunshine, that sunlight and heat are the worst thing for this virus, it can't last there. People are being kept in their homes in California. You know, if you could speak to Gavin Newsom right now, what would you want to say?
I'd say let's get together and talk. I really love solving problems for the American people. I think I feel their hurt. I feel their anger. I feel their pain. They're texting me on Facebook saying, please help us get through this. I'm losing my business. You know, my husband is depressed. My kids are home. They're not in school. When can this nightmare be over? So I am trying to have a voice for those who don't have a voice right now.
Do you feel like, I mean, obviously the video's been pulled down. There's been, you know, articles written about you. This isn't accurate. Do you feel like you're all alone, that you're the only doctor out there that is seeing this, that maybe somehow your data's off or different than everyone else around you?
We have hundreds of doctors from all different specialties who have called me, and I've interviewed some on my website on Zoom who are saying, I see the exact same thing you do. I live in an area that's not busy. People are scared to come into the hospital. They've worked at different urgent cares that have shut down, and they say, I don't understand why we're doing this. I don't think it's the right approach. We have actually hundreds calling in who actually agree with the position.
So then, you know, other than the media, I mean, then why is the media attacking you? I mean, here's the thing, right? This is my question. If you're right, and so many scientists, and you're not, I mean, I've been reporting this for several weeks now. In fact, at the end of the show, I'm going to list about 120 top world scientists that would all agree with you. What is happening in mainstream news then? Can you explain it? Because it seems like they're telling us that we are going to die. We need to stay locked down. We have, you know, all day long music concerts where superstars are telling us, if you want to be a hero, stay in your basement. Burger King telling us, just lay on your couch. That's how you can be an American hero right now. How is that happening?
I think what happens is we started down a pathway of logic. We said, oh boy, Wuhan, China has got millions of people. The initial models that put out said 2 million Americans were going to die, Del. 2 million. We're not even at 100 grand. So the initial models scared us to death. So we said, everybody, you know, shelter in place. I took precautions. My kids came home. I said, oh boy, we don't know what this is. We sheltered in place. I had N95 masks everywhere. You know, I was going to the store with a mask. I towed the line for 2 months. And after seeing my community and going, wait, the hospitals are slow. I'm slow. The disease out here doesn't seem to be reflective of New York. So maybe we should make different decisions in our county because we are not inundated with disease. Maybe we should allow personal responsibility to take place and businesses to open and kids to stay in school. And then I started looking at different countries and going, wow, Dr. Gisecki, you know, 30 years of this, agrees. Wow, Dr. Anders Tegnell agrees. Wow, Dr. Wiskow, and they just kept coming. These epidemiologists who have agreed on this position. So that's when I formulated my opinion after 2 months of reading and studying and talking to colleagues around the country. I decided that I think the best approach is something similar to the Sweden model.
Are you concerned that, given, you know, all human beings want to be right, especially those that have driven our nation into what could really end up looking like a form of a depression? We're seeing jobless rates like we've never seen in my lifetime. Do you have any concern that there's going to be sort of a cover-up or at least sort of trying to soften the details you're talking about to protect those that got us into this? Are you worried that they're using the media to try and hide the fact that there may have been a colossal mistake made here?
You know, Del, I think that if I was a leader and I made a move that maybe didn't have the best outcome, I would pivot. I would say, okay, the decision was made. here's the outcome. Let's pivot. Now let's pivot. Let's get the schools open. Number one, kids under 16, everybody back in school. Let's watch that for 2 weeks. Number two, slowly open restaurants. Number three, open major factories in a stepwise fashion, like coming down a ladder. We've climbed up this ladder that is going to, I don't know where. Let's, in a stepwise fashion, come down and reopen the economy. Whether they try and cover things up, I don't think that's the big issue. The big issue is, how do we get back to a place that's logical and rational and allows people to take personal responsibility for their own health?
Those are all great points that we've been sharing here. I have to say, as a reporter, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but I have been interviewing a lot of people like you. But I think you're one of the most outspoken in America right now. I think it's courageous, whether it seems like you didn't know how courageous you were being, but you are here. You're still speaking out, and I think that makes you an honorable person, and hopefully those videos we put back up on YouTube. I know we're certainly hoping our video stays up. But keep up the good work, and I hope you'll stay in touch as we watch this thing shift. Because as we know, every day this story is changing, the models are changing, and hopefully you've had some influence on really looking at the hard data. Thank you for your time today, Dr. Erickson.
Call me anytime. Be happy to come back.
All right. Take care.
Bye.